Can we have Ricky Gate sir on the stage with us for the session? And we have a small video introduction about sir, and we'll look at the video right now.
Namaskar everyone. Namaste everyone.
Thank you to Ricky K for supporting a better, safer, more prosperous future.
Ricky Kish, our champion for nature.
I take this opportunity to say thank you to Ricky Cash. Ricky has been inspiring and is one of our champions.
My brother Ricky, I'm really proud of you as always.
Here was a man full of energy who was ready to work with these young people and happy to bring hope back to their lives.
And the Grammy goes to Winds of Samsara.
I'd like to thank the Recording Academy. Asatoma Satgamaya Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you.
And the Grammy goes to Stuart Copeland and Ricky Cage.
In India, we've got a saying called as Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which literally means the world is one family. Live in peace with all entities on this planet, whether it is the animals, the wildlife, the forests.
Stuart Copeland, Divine Tides, and Ricky Cage.
Namaste and thank you.
Climate change is absolutely real. Climate change is human-induced, and our actions are affecting countries on the other side of the world.
So that is Ricky Gate sir for us. And so today's session, we have another very important person who's going to join with us to, communicate and interact with sir. And he is none other than Srinivas Bhaiya.
I now hand over the session to Srinivasji to take it forward. Thank you.
Hari Om. How many of us know or recognize our true calling, our Swadharma? How many of us then go on to pursue that Swadharma? How much are we willing to sacrifice in the pursuit of our calling? And if you have gotten this far, how many of us end up dedicating that Swadharma in the service of a higher cause? Today, we have the privilege to hear a person who embodies the essence of such dedication and purpose. Without further ado, I invite Ricky Cage ji to share his wisdom and inspiration with all of us.
Hari Om everyone. Yelrigu Namaskara. Could see lots of people from my hometown. Anyway, huge honor for me to be over here. Thank you so much for allowing me to present my thoughts to you. And of course, a massive thank you to Swami Sarupananda ji. Always great to be in your presence. Thank you so much. A big round of applause for him. Come on. So, first I'll throw out a couple of questions over here. How many of you have ever been to a concert of mine? Oh, quite a few people. And how many of you have been to a talk of mine? Okay, few of you. Okay, fine. So I'll try not to repeat the same jokes. So anyway, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to speak a little bit about my life and my journey into becoming a musician and an environmentalist. And then I'm going to play you some of my music. And then we'll obviously... No, it's not going to be a live performance. I'm going to settle your expectations. It's not going to be a live performance. It's just going to be music video, a couple of music videos. Oh, I'm on the big screen over here. Fantastic. Anyway, so I'm going to just play you some of my music videos. I'm going to give you some context into what I do, and then of course we'll open it up to questions. Now, and we'll try to keep that part, the question part, as long as possible. So ever since I remember, I've always been two things in my life. I've always been a musician and I've always been an environmentalist. Now, these are two pillars that have pretty much dictated my whole life and every single life decision that I've ever made. It's always been either about the environment, or it's been about the music, or it's been at the intersection of both of them. So, you know, I was always obsessed with music. My ears were always more important than my eyes. Like, for example, my classmates and my brother, and everybody who I knew around that age when I was really small, they were obsessed with cartoons. They were obsessed with television, with video games and stuff like that, visual mediums. But for me, the center of my universe has always been my music system. So I would listen to music all day long. I would try to decipher songs, try to understand what are the different musical instruments used within every song, try to understand the cultures behind every musical instrument, what languages they were. And my father had this massive music collection, a huge music collection. During those days, cassette tapes and LPs, I don't think any of you know what that is. But anyway, during my generation, that was a big thing. So we used to have these cassette tapes, LPs, later on CDs and things like that. And he had this huge music collection of not just the pop hits of that era, like musicians like the Bee Gees or Michael Jackson or Madonna and stuff like that. But he also had a lot of so-called obscure music from different parts of the world, like music from sort of exotic music from Africa, from India, from Japan, from Southeast Asia, from South America. And I would listen to all these different cultural forms of music. And so a lot of my education has happened through music, because many times music chronicles the history of a particular nation. Different aspects of a nation, people write music about it, people write songs about it. I would listen to these songs and I would try to understand the history of various countries through music. And of course, even though I was brought up in India and I was brought up in Bangalore, people from Bangalore, you can cheer for that. Yeah. So even though I was brought up in Bangalore, I was actually born in America. I was born in North Carolina, in this really small town known as Roanoke Rapids. So my father is a doctor, and he was a doctor over there for many years. So that's how I was born there. And so we lived in the middle of nowhere. We lived in these very wooded areas. We had quite a large sprawling house, and around our house, there were a whole lot of, forest kind of areas and lots of trees and stuff like that. So we would have a whole lot of creepy, crawly animals that would enter our home on a regular basis. Like, the so-called dangerous, creepy, crawly animals like lizards and snakes and reptiles and rodents and frogs and things like that. And my parents and my teachers, their advice to me would always be that as soon as you see any of these kind of animals, immediately run away from there, or, step on them and kill them immediately. They're very dangerous. My question to them as a really small child used to always be that if we are supposed to kill them the minute we see them, then why do they exist? They obviously have some sort of purpose. Why do they exist? And then, of course, now all of us know that what ancient India used to teach us about all the time, that every single species of animal, no matter how seemingly insignificant, no matter how seemingly dangerous, is a very essential part of our ecosystem. And it's this delicate balance of the ecosystem that keeps all of us alive and keeps the human species sustained. And of course, I can go on and on about this, how, popular media has vilified animals, Like, for example, the shark. The film Jaws, the Steven Spielberg movie Jaws, it did not do anything great for the sharks, It just made us very scared of them. And sharks are not as dangerous as we make them out to be. In fact, for them, human beings are not even food. Human beings is just that, if they feel that a human being is going to attack them, that's when they attack back. It's the same thing with other animals too. Like spiders are vilified. The snake is always the villain of a cartoon. You have Jungle Book, where the tiger is a villain, and the tiger is an endangered species, and the tiger was a villain in this particular movie and this particular cartoon series. And there's only one tiger in the forest, and that one tiger is a villain. Even if they'd balanced it out, where they had a good tiger and they had a bad tiger, even then it would have been better. But there's just one tiger, and that tiger is the villain, and everyone's supposed to cheer when the tiger dies in the end of the movie. Which is not right, correct? So that's what. So popular media has vilified a whole lot of animals, and we need to sort of change that, but yet I digress. But anyway, so for me, nature and music was one and the same entity, and it was very difficult for me to explain that at that particular point in time. But of course, now I can explain that better, why I feel nature and music is one and the same, because at the end of the day, how did music start? Music started off as sounds from within nature. Sounds of the birds, sounds of the animals, sounds of the wind rustling through leaves, sounds of the river flowing, water drops during rain. And then later on, we human beings started imitating those sounds of nature. and making them more musical and making them more pleasing to the human ear. And then we started taking objects from nature, like bamboo flutes and boxes of seeds as percussion instruments, and using animal skin as, as percussion instruments, and, and things like that. And then it's only for the last maybe about 1,000 or 1,500 years that music has actually become academic with notes and scales and rags, and it's being taught as a particular discipline. But nevertheless, music and nature has always been one and the same. In fact, if you look at tribal populations all over the world, indigenous populations all over the world, not just our own country, music and nature is still the same for these amazing people. So anyway, at a very young age, I decided very strongly that music is going to be everything that I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Music is going to be my profession, my hobby, my bread and butter. Everything that I do is going to be about music. And my parents also knew that at some level, that this guy is going to be a musician because that's all that he does and that's all that he's obsessed with. And it's in our 12th grade that we have to make a very strong decision as to what we want to do for the rest of our lives. Whether we want to be a doctor, whether we want to be an engineer or an accountant or whatever, or an entrepreneur. It's in our 12th grade that we have to make a very strong decision. So I had made a very strong decision that I'm going to be a musician. I went to my father, who is a third generation doctor and an Indian parent, as all of us know. So I went to him and I told him that, Dad, I want to be a musician. That's all that I want to do. And my dad was furious because up until then, he in some part of his head, he knew that I wanted to be a musician, but it was not articulated and it wasn't quantified to him in the way that I had mentioned to him directly that, that this is what I want to do. And he kept telling me that, okay, it's all right that you want to be a musician, but what are you going to do in life, So then I said, yeah, music. And then he said that, no, what's your profession going to be? Music is a hobby. And after that, there were a lot of fights at home. There was a lot of pushing and pulling, a lot of arguments, a lot of fireworks. And then at the end of it, my father and mother and I reached a compromise that I would finish off a degree in dental surgery. And and once I get that degree in dental surgery, then my life was my own and they would never question me again for the rest of my life. So that's what I did. I went to 5 years of dental college. And in the evenings, I was doing music. And my college would be from 9 to 5. And then from 5 o'clock in the evening to about 2 o'clock in the morning, I would be at some studio recording music. So right from the first year of my dentistry, my musical career had already started thriving. And I was already creating music for various, various entities. And I was already making money doing music. Okay, thank you. So my musical career had already thrived. And my parents sort of had the confidence that, that this guy is going to do well in music, because by then, I'd already stopped taking money from my parents, and and I was already making a good living for myself doing music. And at the end of 5 years and 5 years of going to college, I did not know anything in dentistry, but I got a degree in dental surgery, which is a testimony to the education system nowadays. But anyway, nevertheless, I got this degree in dental surgery, and I went very ceremoniously to my father. And I gave him the degree, and I told him that dentistry is a very noble profession. It's a very important profession. Especially, I would know that because I'm on a dental chair getting treatment pretty often. So basically, it's a very noble profession and it's a very important profession, but it's not for me. I want to be a musician, and this is what my passion is. This is what exactly I want to do. They completely understood. So I gave the degree certificate to my father, did not practice even for a single day. And instead of doing music from 5 o'clock in the evening to 2 o'clock in the morning, I was doing music for 24 hours after that. So that started off my musical profession. Now, if you think about it, I do not blame my father for doing a degree for 5 years, which I would never use later on in my life, because I completely understand that his motivations were based on fear. Fear of me failing, fear of me starving to death, fear of me not standing up well in society, fear of what he would tell his relatives as to what I do for a living. So all these fears that he had, whereas for me, everything was about passion and everything was about, living the life that I wanted to live. So I do not blame him. And of course, he understood that. So I'm just like, making him out to be an unnecessary villain over here. But he completely understood all of that. And, of course, we share a very close relationship. But nevertheless, imagine if I was fearful. Like most people are, that after I finish off the dental degree, I have this degree in my hand and I would wonder that, all right, let me have a day job, let me have a day job as a dentist, and, let me make money over there and let me do music in the evenings, like what I was doing in college. Then I would have a clinic, and I would have a clinic from 9 to 5. I would go to this particular clinic at 9 o'clock in the morning, open up the clinic, start treating patients, do all these various, procedures on my patients. And all that I would be thinking about in my head is that when can I go back home and, and play on my guitar or play on my keyboard or, or make some music. I would be a very frustrated professional. In such kind of a scenario, would any of you like to come to me for a tooth extraction or for a surgical procedure or anything like that? Obviously not. So basically that's. I'm just glad that I decided to jump into the deep end of the swimming pool and decided to just figure out my way through. Because I think you have to be true to yourself at the end of the day. This whole day job thing when it comes to the arts does not work, because it's not like if you want to become a doctor, you say that, oh, maybe in the beginning of my career, I might not be able to make enough money, so let me have a day job and let me do medicine for fun. You don't do that. So if you want to make something a profession, you have to treat it with the absolute respect that you would for any other kind of a traditional career path or traditional profession. And that's what I tried doing. And so I started off my musical career doing commercials for television and radio. The ads that come on television and radio, they always require music. So I started off my career doing that. And in a span of about 13 years, I did more than 3,500 commercials for various brands. Thank you. So I did, you name the brand, whether it's Google or Microsoft or Airtel or Vodafone or Levi's or Lee or McDonald's or Burger King, or you name the brand and their competitor, I was creating music for them in various parts of the world. So I was working really, really hard. I would wake up in the morning at about 7 o'clock and I would get to the studio and I would get a brief from a client in India. I would wrap up that particular jingle by about 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I would get a brief from a client in, let's say, Germany or France or something like that, some European country. And then I would finish that off by about 9 o'clock. And then at about 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, I would get a brief from a client in Los Angeles. And I would wrap that up by about 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, sleep for a couple of hours, then repeat the cycle. So I was working really, really hard doing all of this. And then after doing this for about 13 years, it sort of struck me that these big brands have understood the power of music. Now, they've understood the power of music so much so that they're ready to spend a few $1,000s on me to create a piece of music for them to sell something, because they're always trying to sell something. And not only that, but they're ready to spend a few $1 million to actually air that music on television and radio, because it costs a lot of money to air this music and these advertisements on television and radio. So they're ready to spend, as I mentioned, a few $1,000s on me to actually create the music and a couple of $1 million to actually air this music on television and radio, because they have understood that music is a really, really powerful language, not just for communicating a message, but for retaining that message deep in the consciousness of a listener. Like the songs that we learned during our childhood are songs that we never forget. If there are any morals in those morals dictate our lives, because we constantly think about those morals if we learn these morals through songs. So that is when I decided that I, being a musician, I need to understand the power of music a lot better than what I currently was at that particular point in time. So that is when I decided that I'm going to stop all forms of commercial music. This was around the year 2013. I decided I'm going to stop all forms of commercial music. And the only kind of music that I'm going to make is about things that I feel strongly about. As I mentioned earlier, I felt strongly about the environment, felt strongly about nature. I was an environmentalist even before I knew what the meaning of the word environmentalist was. And I decided that these are the things that I'm going to be creating music on. So then that is when, as a sudden stop, I decided to stop all forms of commercial music. And I decided that every single piece of music that comes off my fingers, comes out of my head, comes out of my studio, is going to be in my own small, tiny capacity to make this world a better place. And that's what started off the next journey of mine. And I started creating music on topics that I felt strongly about. So in doing this, there was this South African flute player, a gentleman called Wouter Kellerman, who I was a huge fan of his music, brilliant flute player. And I wanted to work with him. So I reached out to him, and there was a huge coincidence that he was a huge fan of my music, and he knew all about my music and knew all about my albums and things like that. So then both of us decided to meet each other, and we got this opportunity to meet each other in Los Angeles. at a music conference. And while we were chatting with each other, while we were brainstorming as to how, we would work with each other, we came across another huge coincidence that he had just finished making a piece of music on his father of the nation, that is Nelson Mandela. And I had just finished making a piece of music on my father of the nation, that is Mahatma Gandhi. And we also realized there's a whole lot of cross-pollination over here, simply because, as we all know, Mahatma Gandhi spent his formative years in South Africa, so he had a lot of South Africanness in him. And Nelson Mandela was heavily inspired by the non-violence movement by Mahatma Gandhi, so he had a lot of Indianness in him. So we decided this is how we'll work with each other. I'll send you my Indian music, and you add South Africanness to it, and you send me your South African music, and I'll add Indianness to it. And we started working on this, and we became the best of friends. We traveled around the world. We spent about 2 years working on music. And at the end of 2 years, we had enough music, because we had recorded so much of music, collaborated with so many musicians from around the world, that we had enough music to actually make a whole album. So we sat down together in my home in Bangalore, and then we crafted an album, we created an album, we released this album in 2014, and this album went on to winning awards all over the world. It became the highest selling instrumental album in the world in 2014. And this album went on to winning me my first Grammy Award in 2015. Thank you. So then, after that, I had another life-changing experience. So after I won my Grammy Award in 2015, Prime Minister Modi had invited me for a meeting. What was supposed to be a 5-minute meeting, just a photo op, let's take a picture with the trophy and congratulations. It was supposed to be just a quick 5-minute meeting. But then when I went to his office, it ended up being an hour-long discussion. And we were just discussing about my thoughts on the environment. Prime Minister Modi was discussing about his thoughts on the environment and his thoughts on civilization, his thoughts on Indian culture. And it ended up being a beautiful conversation between both of us. And at the end of the conversation, we just looked at each other and we realized that, all right, let's interpret this conversation into music. And then he told me that he's going to be visiting that particular year in 2015, in December, he is going to be visiting the climate change conference in Paris. That is the COP21. Now, the COP21, for those of you who don't remember what it was, the climate change conference, the Paris Climate Change Conference, as it was called popularly, it was a United Nations conference to discuss climate change. So up until today, it's got the unique distinction of being the largest gathering of world leaders in the history of humankind. So 195 presidents and prime ministers from around the world, world leaders, came together to discuss the future of our planet, to discuss climate action and how to mitigate the effects of climate change and how to make a world which is better for our future generations. So he told me that he's going to be at the climate change conference. He's going to have the main stage for a while. He's going to be launching the Solar Alliance, and he's going to be delivering a keynote speech. So he told me that if I make an album that is truly inclusive, that has got musicians from all over the world, which discusses climate change, discusses climate action, discusses environmentalism in the best possible way, he said that if he likes the album, he will launch it at the climate change conference, and he'll ensure every single world leader gets a copy of the album. So I thought, okay, challenge accepted. And he also encouraged me not only to dedicate my music to the causes that I feel strongly about, but also to dedicate my life itself to these causes. And I thought that was beautiful advice coming from the leader of our nation, so obviously I took it very seriously. I left his office thinking that this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to make that album. I'm going to make sure that album is absolutely fantastic. And also I'm going to dedicate my life to the causes that I feel strongly about, and I'm going to live the life. So I left his office. Thank you. And I made an album called Shanti Samsara. Shanti Samsara, World Music for Environmental Consciousness. So this album featured 500 musicians from 40 countries. Musicians from Azerbaijan, from Turkey, of course from India, and then from USA, from Japan, from Korea, from Senegal, from South Africa, from Canada, from Peru, basically every corner of the globe where I could find a musician who felt as strongly as I did about climate action and about the environment. I collaborated with them and I made this album. I presented it to Prime Minister Modi, and he loved the album. And then he ended up launching the album at the Climate Change Conference in Paris, along with the then French president. along with the then French President François Hollande and the then United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and of course every single world leader, true to his word, Prime Minister Modi gifted the album to every single world leader who was present, and of course I constantly keep performing that music even today at my concerts. It's an album which is very, very close to my heart. So then, while I was watching this particular Paris climate change conference, now the conference, these COP conferences, how they work is that it's usually about 8 to about 11 days. The Paris Climate Change Conference was about an 11-day conference. And during that conference, there are multiple halls. And of course, it's huge about not only do the world leaders show up for these conferences, as I said, 195 world leaders, but also more than 20,000 delegates show up for these conferences. You know, stakeholders, scientists, and and bureaucrats, and corporate leaders, thought leaders, all of them show up for these conferences, NGOs. They have a main plenary hall, and in this main plenary hall, every single one of these 195 world leaders has to give a presentation, and usually this presentation is for 10 to 15 minutes. So every single world leader goes up on that stage, they give a 10 to 15-minute presentation on what they're doing for mitigating the effects of climate change, or what are the problems they're facing, or what they feel the world should be doing. Whatever they want to present, they can present. Prime Minister Modi, of course, gave a fantastic speech over there. And one world leader who absolutely caught my attention over there was one world leader, a gentleman called President Anote Tong of the island nation of Kiribati. Okay? The island nation of Kiribati. Kiribati is a South Pacific island nation. It's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And this world leader, he went up on stage and he gave a very, very short speech. Instead of giving a presentation for about 10 or 15 minutes, he gave a presentation for all of 30 seconds. He went up on stage and all that he said was, all you 195 world leaders present over here, please pass a resolution that ensures that my people of Kiribati stay above the water. Now that was a very, very powerful statement. He said that all you 195 countries present over here, please pass a resolution that ensures that my people of Kiribati stay above the water. Now this quite shook me, and what shook me even more was that I hadn't even heard of this country, Kiribati, let alone her disastrous fate. So like what everybody does, I started Googling about Kiribati and I started understanding about the country. And I realized that Kiribati is a country in the South Pacific. Actually, if you look at the maps and globes, it's right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And you can probably try out this exercise at home, or when you get some Wi-Fi signal. So you can try out this exercise where you go onto Google Earth, the app Google Earth, and you turn the globe around. So at one point you'll see Africa, and you'll see North America and South America. You move it a little bit, then you'll see Africa and Europe. You move it around a little bit, you'll be able to see Russia, India. You'll be able to see Australia. You move it around a little bit. And then you'll see something that is normally never shown in our textbooks or in our curriculums, or it's never shown in popular media. The whole globe becomes blue color. And that's the Pacific Ocean. The entire round circle is basically blue in color. And that is never shown as being planet Earth. That's never shown. You always show landmass when you show planet Earth. But at this particular point, the whole globe is blue color. And you go right to the center of that blue, that is where Kiribati is. So Kiribati has got 21 inhabited islands. It used to be 33 inhabited islands. Now it's 21 inhabited islands, right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And they are very significant because they are on the international date line and they are on the equator. So they are the only country in the world that has got landmass in all 4 quadrants of the planet. So they've got landmass in all 4 quadrants of the planet. And they bring in the sunrise every morning and they bring in the New Year's every year. Because they are the first to, when it comes to the international time zones, they are number 1 in the world. So they are a very geographically significant country, and they are very significant, and I'll explain to you why. Now, this particular country is predicted to be the first country that's going to go completely underwater due to climate change, and it is irreversible for this country. They are predicted to be the first country that's going to go completely underwater, which means that during our lifetime, we're going to have to redo our maps and globes, because the part where Kiribati is, we're going to have to paint in blue, because they're just going to disappear from the face of the earth. So I had to see things for myself. I had to understand Kiribati for myself. I had to sensitize myself to their issues. So I went to Kiribati. I spent 3 weeks over there, spent a lot of time with their president, spent a lot of time with their people. and spent a lot of time understanding their culture, falling in love with their culture, falling in love with their traditions. And I realized that this is a country that does not take more than they can give back from nature. They are an environmentally conscious society. They do not have any known industrialization, almost negligible carbon emissions, negligible impact on the environment. But yet, if all of our countries, that is developing nations and developed nations, if we can build domes around our borders and keep our carbon emission and pollution within our own borders, then countries like Kiribati have nothing to worry about. But the problem is that it is one atmosphere all over the world, and a really, really thin atmosphere. They say that our atmosphere is so thin, and to give you a visual idea of how thin our atmosphere is, just think of an orange, a fruit, an orange fruit. And you put a layer of varnish on top of it. That layer of varnish, that is basically the thickness of the atmosphere that our planet has got. That is how thin our atmosphere is. So imagine how easy it is to fill up this particular atmosphere with pollution and carbon emissions. It's so easy, it's so simple. Because in the past, we used to always think that, if we pollute the atmosphere, this particular carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide is going to go somewhere, Or if we throw a plastic bag on the street or whatever, it's going to go somewhere. Or if we throw our sewage into a river, it's going to go somewhere. Because we used to always feel that everything that we have is in abundance and everything is infinite. But now we realize that nothing is infinite, everything is finite. Whatever we call resources, which we shouldn't call resources, first of all, everything is finite and everything will get over. And our atmosphere will get filled up, our rivers will get choked, our land will get choked. So basically, the thing is that, that first of all, we have to understand what climate change is. So I'm not going to assume that everybody knows the exact analytics and the scientific data and all of that stuff. But in a broad sense, what climate change is that, that the sun's rays enters our planet and it gives us nourishment, it gives us help with photosynthesis and all of that stuff. And we take whatever warmth that we need, and whatever is not required, that bounces back off and it goes back into the atmosphere. It goes back into space, rather. So we keep whatever warmth we need within our own Earth's atmosphere, and whatever is not required goes back. But then what happens is that because of an unnatural amount of carbon that is in our atmosphere, because of this, the sun's rays and our heat is getting trapped within our planet. And because of this, it's starting a whole lot of chain reactions. Number one is that, of course, the polar ice caps melt. And as all of us know, the density of ice is more than that of water. So once the ice melts, the water levels rise. Because of that, coastal areas and islands go underwater. And then, of course, the salinity of the water changes because the ice has got fresh water. So the salinity of water changes because of this, the ocean currents change, and because of the ocean currents changing, our climate is changing. So it's not that every place is becoming hotter. Some places are going unnaturally cold. Some places are becoming hotter. Our natural disasters are getting worse and worse with every year. We see in our news, every single cyclone, every single hurricane is just getting worse and worse. And that's all because of climate change. So anyway, so President Anote Tong told me some really important things. And he, just to give you a background on him, he was their 3-term president. He's termed out now because you can only have 3 terms as a president in Kiribati. So he's termed out now. But he was a 3-term president and one of the greatest presidents ever. So he said that we as Kiribati are on the front line of climate change. We are on the front line of climate change because we are low-lying islands. They're very low-lying islands. So we are on the front line of climate change and we are going to submerge, we are going to fall. And when we fall, that front line is going to keep moving back and keep receding till those people and those countries who felt that they would never be affected by climate change will be affected, and that is the reality of the situation. So Kiribati is a country that is not at fault at climate change at all. What they are doing is suffering the consequences of our actions. Am I right? So they're not at the front line of climate change. And that's the problem with climate change, that people who are least at fault when it comes to climate change are the ones who are suffering its consequences. And that is exactly what's happening with Kiribati. Another thing that he told me, which was very important, is that when there is a hurricane or a disaster in our countries, when there is a hurricane and a disaster, then the water enters our homes and then at some point in time it recedes. Doesn't it? So when there's a flood, the water enters our homes and then the water leaves. Or we can expel the water out. But in their case, in climate change, the water just keeps entering their homes. It just keeps entering their homes till their homes and their ancestral lands becomes part of the ocean bed. Isn't that such a difficult thing to even think about? That our homes just become part of the ocean bed and then you have to leave your own homes and you have to leave your own lands. So what I did while I was over there is that I made a song with the population of Kiribati. I made a song with their traditional, with their traditional cultural significances. Since I'm a musician, that's what I did, and I made a video. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to play you that video. So you can play the video number 2. And let's continue the conversation after that.
The science is very clear about climate change. Within the century, our entire nation will be underwater. As in some countries, you have a cyclone, a hurricane. Over time, the land remains there, the water recedes. In our case, it does not. It's a disaster that doesn't go away. Our reality is that we have communities who already have to relocate, left their villages. We have communities which are on the verge of doing the same thing. For us, climate change is not something that's likely to happen in the future. It is happening, we are facing it.
Grown from the earth, children of the sun. Though we may have forgotten, her song is still sung. No need to steal what she freely gives, and no need to fear when she only knows love.
I've always referred our situation as those countries on the front line, because when we fall, there'll be another front line, and that front line will keep moving back until those countries and those people who believe they will not be affected will eventually be affected, and that is the reality we are facing. I think as human beings, we are being challenged. Should we do something about it? And I believe, yes, everybody has the responsibility to do it.
So if you only think about it, all those children that you saw in that video, all those Kiribati children, they will not have the opportunity to grow up in their own country. Because very soon they're going to become refugees of a new kind. And that is known as climate refugees. So we may or may not be able to do anything about Kiribati's future because, as I said, a lot of what is going on over there is irreversible right now. If we go on business as usual or even if we have corrective measures, they've pretty much reached the tipping point. But at the same time, we can use Kiribati as a very good example to showcase that climate change is not some vague phenomenon that may or may not happen in the future. Climate change is absolutely real. Climate change is human-induced. And our actions sitting down over here are having disastrous consequences on people on the other side of the world. Anyway, so coming back to India, I wanted to just quickly mention about how we need to sensitize ourselves and how we need to understand that every action that we have have got consequences. Now, do you remember in 2020, just at the beginning of the pandemic, there was this image which went completely viral all over the world of this pregnant female elephant who had died while she was standing in the middle of a water body in Kerala. Do you all remember that? Yeah. It was a very, very powerful image, very, very powerful image, and it was printed everywhere from, from all the, from the Los Angeles Times to the Washington Post to CNN to all the Indian newspapers, this pregnant female elephant, a very heartbreaking image of her standing and dead in the middle of a water body. So for those of you who do not know the story, it's very simple. This female pregnant elephant, she wanders out of the forest in search of food. And then she walks into a farmland, and in the farmland, she picks up a pineapple and she eats the pineapple. Little did she know that the pineapple was laden with explosives. And she eats that pineapple. It fatally damages her mouth. And then she wobbles her way, walking through to the water body. She gets to the water body, and she stands right in the middle of the water body, and she dies over there. And of course, it was truly heartbreaking. And then when this image was across newspapers and across periodicals and online social media all over the world, the immediate knee-jerk reactions came out from everywhere where, the farmer should be punished, the farmer should be hung upside down, the farmer should be killed, the farmer should be electrocuted, or the farmer should go to jail for life. And yes, the farmer needs to be punished. But what we do not do is that we do not look inwards when situations or when incidents like this happen. Now, if you think about it, if we do not have electricity for just 3 or 4 minutes, we are so inconvenienced. We are so inconvenienced that why is there no electricity for 3 or 4 minutes? If there is the new iPhone that comes out or a new electronic gadget that comes out in the market, and we go to the store to try to purchase it, or we go online to try to purchase it, and if it's out of stock, then we are like, why can't they make more of these? What's wrong with them? Why is it out of stock? Now, if you think about it, where is all that coal coming from for our electricity? Where is all that iron ore, manganese, silica, lithium, cadmium, nickel? Where is all of that coming from for building our electronic gadgets? All of that is coming from basically digging up the forests. That's all coming from degrading the forest and destroying the forest. And when you destroy the forest, when we destroy the forest due to our consumption patterns, when we destroy the forest, the elephants have no other alternative but to leave the forest and to search for food. And then they end up going into a farmland. And when they go to the farmlands, which is in the fringes of the forest, then the farmer has got no other alternative but to protect his or her livelihoods and to protect the lives of his or her family. And then they have to do this ridiculous and punishable offense of actually putting explosives into fruits to protect his or her livelihoods. And at the end of the day, instead of blaming the farmer entirely, of course, it is the farmer's fault and the farmer needs to be punished. But instead of blaming the farmer entirely, what we need to do is that we need to have a mirror in front of us and we need to reflect and we need to see that, all right, what is it that I can do within my own capacity to bring about change? Because at the end of the day, nature is but a reflection of ourselves. And the pain and suffering that we inflict on nature, at the end of the day, is pain and suffering that will eventually be inflicted on ourselves. That's the way it is. That's the way that this world works. So basically, when we speak about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is basically our theme for the G20 presidency, everybody knows what Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is. The world is one family. But we rarely go to the actual meaning of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is that it's not just about living in peace and harmony between all of us, all of us within the human species. It's all about living in peace and harmony with every single entity on this planet, whether it's living or non-living. So it's all about living in peace and harmony with the forest and wildlife and also with the elements of nature. Now, in India, what I'm really, really happy about is that in India, and I'm very proud to be an Indian, that we've lived in coexistence with our forests and wildlife for the longest period of time. In fact, we pray to our forests, we pray to our wildlife, we revere our forests, we revere our wildlife. But, and there's always a but over here, but with growing human greed, as I mentioned earlier, with growing human need, with growing human population, what's happening is that we are destroying the habitats of the elephants, we are destroying their food sources, we are fragmenting their habitats by roads and by railway lines and all of that stuff. And because of this, we've got something known as human and elephant conflict. Now, what is human and elephant conflict? It's pretty much a warlike situation between us humans and elephants. And during this human and elephant conflict, There is loss of life and loss of property, as I described, on both sides of the equation, sometimes on the elephant side, sometimes on the human side. And when there's loss of property on the human side, then our authorities have to make the very, very painful decision to capture these elephants and to relocate them. Now, you're not actually killing the elephant. So it's a very humane solution, don't get me wrong, it's a very humane solution. You're actually just capturing the elephant and you're relocating the elephant. But this capturing and relocation process itself is extremely traumatic, mentally excruciating, painful, not just for the elephant involved, but for all the humans involved in this capturing and relocation process, especially our Indian Forest Department. Now, I've traveled around the world. I've met foresters everywhere in the world, forest departments everywhere in the world through my role as being a Goodwill Ambassador with the United Nations. But I can completely vouch and say with full conviction that our Indian Forest Department is the best forest department in the whole world. They're the most passionate people. They're really good at what they do. Everything about them is about passion for wildlife and passion for coexistence. So I'm going to be playing you another song. It's a song called Love Divine, which is dedicated to all these thoughts that I mentioned and this capturing and relocation process itself. And it's dedicated to our Indian Forest Department and to the elephant, because just because the elephant is the largest walking mammal on our planet, that does not mean that the elephant does not need our protection. In fact, it is the exact opposite. That just because the elephant is the largest walking mammal on our planet, it needs our protection the most. Here is the song, Love Divine.
You do unto me, you do unto yourself, oh la 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 divine is the very heart of mine for all of time. If you were really free, then you would clearly see there is no you or I, there is no yours or mine. The womb of life itself is love divine. That you do unto me, you do unto yourself, oh la 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 divine is the very heart of mine for all of time. For all time. Hey, hey.
Thank you. So, with all the problems that we face on our planet, and they say that, that we've got a triple planetary emergency. We've got climate change, we've got species extinction, we've got deforestation, plastics pollution, air pollution, so many social issues that we have. I believe that the biggest threat to us as a species, as the human species, the biggest threat to us is the constant thought that we have that somebody else will make a difference. We're always waiting for governments to make a difference, for intergovernmental bodies, for politicians, for leaders, for corporations to make a difference. When the truth is that the only way we can bring about meaningful change is if we change our own behaviors. Everybody talks about changing the world, but we very rarely talk about changing ourselves. And even I've been guilty about that. We always talk about changing the world, but we very rarely talk about changing ourselves. And that's not because we are some sort of evil people or we are bad people. It's just because we have not empowered ourselves to believe that the small, tiny, incremental changes, that we can make within our own tiny capacities actually matter. But at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Now, how do we encourage everybody to bring about change? How do we encourage ourselves to do that? How do we do all of this? Now, the golden question is not about awareness, because whatever I mentioned today, whether it's climate change, whether it is species issues, or whether it's loss of biodiversity, whatever I mentioned today, everybody is aware of all of these problems at some level. Maybe not at an analytical level or a scientific level, but everybody knows that there's something like climate change, which is an issue for all of us. It's an existential threat. And, and we've got species that are, forests that are being destroyed and all of that stuff. All of us know that. So the golden question is not actually about awareness. The golden question is, how do we convert mere awareness of problems into taking action within our own lives? Because that's what we are not doing. We're not taking action within our own lives. We feel that if I stop using single-use plastics, what difference will it make? Or if I use public transportation, what difference will it make? Or if I'm just kind to people around me, what difference will it make? So we always feel that I'm too small, what difference will it make? But that's all that matters. So I believe that to convert awareness of problems to action, making that conversion of just being aware of problems to taking concrete steps and taking action, I believe that that is where arts can play a very important role. How many of you consider yourselves to be artists over here? I mean, you could even be an engineer and be an artist, because everything is art. So how many of you consider yourselves to be artists? Fantastic. So I believe that what it takes is that, scientific data is extremely important. What scientists tell us about problems and solutions is extremely important, and without that, we cannot progress as the human species. But at the same time, I believe that if we showcase just plain and simple scientific data and pie charts and analytics and, and statistics to people, then it will not inspire them to bring about change. What is needed is for artists to interpret these complex ideas and thoughts into the emotional language of music or storytelling or arts, and thus reach people on a level which is their hearts and souls. And that is what will inspire people to bring about change, and that is what is important. So that is what I would encourage everyone to do, that make your communication with everybody extremely simple. Make your communication to yourself simple. Try to understand what are the problems at the crux of it and what we can do within our own capacities to actually make a difference. Now, I'm going to conclude my talk over here and make it interactive right now. But before I finish, I always end all of my talks and my concerts with this one thing. So basically, India as a country is much more than just us human beings. Am I right? Am I right? Yes. So India as a country is much more than just us human beings. In fact, the true inhabitants and the true citizens of India are the forests and wildlife, because they've existed on our land long before any of us humans have ever set foot here. In fact, we human beings have been on this land for 3 lakh years. For 3 lakh years. And our forests and wildlife have been here for 3,000 lakh years. Where is 3 lakh years? Where is 3,000 lakh years? So basically, our beauty, our sustainability, our country itself, what defines it is our forests and wildlife. And without thriving ecosystems, without healthy ecosystems, without healthy forests and wildlife, we as human beings will not exist. Am I right? So what I did was that I took my favorite melody in the whole wide world, that is our Indian national anthem, and I created an instrumental version of it. And we decided to dedicate this instrumental version to the forests and wildlife of our country. So if you would please indulge me. let us all rise, if you are able to stand up, let us all rise for the forest and wildlife of our country, and let us all rise for the Indian national anthem. Thank you so much.
So we'll have some question and answer. I'll start with the questions. So, how many of you all are aware of how big a thing is Grammy Award? So, what Oscar is to films, Grammy is to music. And Ricky KG is one among only 12 Indians who has received this Grammy Award.
Actually, it's 4.
It's 4? Okay. Or if you include them not being Indian citizens?
No, it's only 4.
Okay. So, Ricky KG is among a very august company, if you look at among Indians, people who have got the Grammy Award. He's in the august company of Pandit Ravi Shankar, Pandit Vishwamohan Bhatt,
A.R. Rahman and me.
So, how does this remarkable achievement sit so lightly on your shoulders?
I guess every award, it's difficult for me to explain that because it was not like I planned to win a Grammy Award. It happened the first time. And but at the same time, see, my music is music with a mission and it's got a very strong purpose. And so for me, the way that I look at every award and every recognition is that there are obviously 2 ways to look at it. One is through vanity, that, oh, I won this award, I'm better than everybody else, which is not the right way to look at an award. The second way is to look at an award as being a platform for doing bigger and better things and to reach your music and your message further and wider, because that's the main aim of all of this. So I would say that, yeah, I look at it the second way, that every time I win an award, for me, it's always that, okay, I've been given this platform. I've been really fortunate to get this platform. So how do I, how do I further my, my message, like to a wider audience, basically, with this, because this platform is a huge gift that has been given to me. So that's how that I look at awards. So a lot of people say that, that awards are not important and all of that stuff. And to an extent, that is true because the aim should not be to actually win an award. But at the same time, when an award happens and you're recognized for your work, then I feel that it is really important to get that recognition, because that recognition helps you to do whatever you're doing in a much bigger and a better way.
So I understand that you professionally monitor your carbon footprint.
Yes.
So what would be your advice to people, especially those living in cities? What can they do to not only reduce their carbon footprint, but just to be mindful about these aspects?
So what I can do is that I can tell you what I do within my own life, and you can probably draw whatever you would like and whatever is an option for you. So there are 4 things that I do within my own life to reduce my carbon footprint and to at least in my mind, lead a more sustainable life. The first thing that I do is that I do not subscribe to fast fashion at all. So this whole paradigm of that every single picture on Instagram needs to be in a completely different costume or a different, you need to be wearing completely different clothes with every photograph on social media. We should definitely do away with this. what we should do is that we should buy good quality clothes and constantly rewear them and double down on them. Show people on social media that I am responsible, I'm rewearing my clothes, and I'm responsible to our planet, and that's the reason why I do it. Now, what people do not realize is basically the impact that our clothes have on our environment. Like, for example, if you have a cotton pant, you may say that, okay, it's a sustainable material, it's made out of 100% cotton or whatever. But if you think about it and you think about action and consequence, what I spoke about earlier in my talk, that cotton has to be grown, right? Like, the cotton for the pant, it has to be grown somewhere. And it's about 12 to 14 plants of cotton are required to actually make a cotton pant, which is sort of like a small area of a field that you need to plant these cotton trees. And then after that, you need to harvest them. You need to water them for a very long time, for a couple of weeks for them to be harvested. So all that water goes into it. Then you harvest them. Then it is transported via air or via ship to a completely different country for processing. And then after that, it's transported via ship or air to a completely different country, maybe a few thousand miles away, to actually process and to weave. And then after that, for dyeing, it is sent to another place. And then after that, it's sent to a completely different place for manufacturing. And then it's sent all over the world for actually selling. So a single cotton pant, the water footprint, the amount of water that is used for a single cotton pant is 8,000 liters of water. So 8,000. So basically, if you buy that one less cotton pant, you're saving 8,000 liters of water straight away. So that's how. And a cotton T-shirt, you may think a T-shirt is much lesser. It's not much lesser. A cotton T-shirt is 6,000 liters of water. That's how much goes into making a cotton T-shirt. So basically, I would say that rewear clothes, because at the end of the day, the earth does not remember what you've worn, but the earth remembers how you treat it. And of course, fashion can be fashionable more than once. So just keep rewearing your clothes. The second thing that I do is that and this is a path that all of you all have to figure out for yourselves. I have a meat-free diet. That's what I consume. So basically, meat is also an equally polluting industry on this planet. And you can read about why it is so polluting, but this has got a very strong cultural significance. So this is a path that everybody has to take for themselves as to how to reduce your meat consumption or to eliminate it completely. But that is completely up to you. But this is what I've done in my life. The third thing is that I do not own a car. So many years ago, I was a car fanatic. I used to have between 3 to 4 cars at any given point of time. And I used to love driving around and things like that. But then later on, I realized that when I travel to a foreign country, I learn the public transportation system over there and I follow public transportation. So why can't I do that in my own country and my own city? Because it's obviously easier to do it in my own city and in my own country. So that is when I sold my cars and I decided that I'm only going to use public transportation. So that's what I do. And there is this huge stigma that is associated with public transportation, especially in India. And you see that in the global south. You see that in developing nations, where if somebody's got a motorcycle or somebody's got a car, then they feel that going by a bus or traveling by metro is a step backwards, which you should not think of it in that way, because actually, the richest people travel by public transportation in countries like Europe and America, and we need to bring that back. And of course, we can argue that the public transportation systems in India are not that great, but it'll only happen if there's a ground-up movement and more of us demand public transportation. So I would say that one advice that I would give everyone, or one request that I would have, is that try to figure out public transportation in your own city. Try to use it as much as possible. Try to create a critical mass so that the authorities to be will be forced or coerced into giving us better and better public transportation systems. Then the fourth thing is that, as you mentioned, I get my carbon footprint audited every quarter. So this is something that everybody can follow, because there are many, especially if you're entrepreneurs or you're planning to be entrepreneurs, there are many of these firms which audit your carbon footprint just like how they would audit your finances every quarter. So my carbon footprint is audited right from air travel to my ground transportation to my purchasing, my diet. Everything is basically audited. And then at the end of the quarter, we have a meeting with that particular firm to figure out how we can reduce my impact on the environment, because it's not possible to have a zero impact, but we can reduce our impact as much as possible. And whatever impact I had, I try to mitigate it through tree plantation and investment in renewable energy companies. So that way I lead a net zero lifestyle.
And going forward, I think with all the metros coming up in the cities, I think it is going to help the public transportation drastically.
100%. And even, train travel, I think what we should do is that we should We should also look at train travel between cities. I do that very often when I have the time, of course, because I'm doing concerts back to back. I'm very guilty of a lot of air travel. But at the same time, I try to travel by train, and the Vande Bharatam trains are absolutely amazing. I've traveled on them a few times. And in fact, I've chronicled a lot of my train travel in the last 1 year. I've done a tremendous amount of train travel in the last 1 year. I've chronicled that, and I'll be releasing a music video on that very soon.
That's lovely to hear. So we'll open up the questions to the audience. So,
Hello, sir. Ariyom. I'm Nitish from Chennai. The reason I came here is there is two reasons. One is for be there, and another is to meet my inspiration and idol, and that is you, sir.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And another thing is that I'm an aspiring musician and a music composer. And can you just guide me how to take it as a career? And also, another thing is that in future, can we collaborate, sir?
Directly to the point. Yeah, you can sit down. Yeah. And you can probably hand over the mic, yeah. So, it's a very good question that you asked about the career thing, and I'm going to give a very straightforward answer. It may not be an answer that you like, but of course, we as we musicians who are living in India, we face a huge problem, especially convincing parents and and convincing people around us that we can take up music as a career, and sometimes even convincing ourselves. So I believe that being a musician, we cannot be just a musician nowadays. And that's the simple truth. We cannot be just a musician. We cannot be that I'm just an artist and some other people are going to do everything for us. We have to be a musician. We have to have leadership qualities. We have to be a leader, and we have to be an entrepreneur. Now I'll explain to you why. We have to be, of course, a very, very good musician. We have to be the best possible at our art. And there is no two ways about it. We have to be extremely good at our art. That is one thing, and constantly updating our skills and getting our skills better and better. The second thing is that we have to be a leader, because music is not an isolated art. We have to deal with music video makers. We have to deal with engineers, sound engineers, other musicians, orchestras, and basically record labels, distribution people. We have to deal with a whole lot of people. And unless we have that leadership ability, there is no way for us to survive. So we have to have the leadership ability to lead teams. The third thing is that we have to be entrepreneurs, because we are constantly selling something. And what are we selling? We are selling ourselves. Now the thing is that I believe that if you cannot convince your parents that you'll be a good musician, and if you do not have that leadership ability that you're able to stand up and convince your parents that you're not a good musician, then probably this career is not for you. The reason being that if you're not able to convince your parents that you are a good musician and that you'll be able to make this into a career and you'll be able to make this into a viable career, that means that you lack that leadership ability at all. Because if you can't convince your parents, you can't convince another million people that you're a good musician. So I think you have to have that leadership ability, and you have to be able to, and because a lot of people ask me, I'm not able to convince my parents. Then I'm like, okay, then this is not for you. It's plain and simple. It's a very difficult career. It's not a traditional career path where you get campus selected and you get into a thing, and then later on you do your MBA and you get into management or whatever. It's not like that at all. You have to constantly work hard. I can tell you about myself, and you can probably derive something from there. I'm a musician. As mentioned, I've won 3 Grammy Awards. I've won the most number of Grammy Awards right now in India. But I can, right now, off the top of my head, and I'm saying this with complete honesty and complete candor, that off the top of my head, in my own city of Bangalore, not even by thinking, I can just rattle out 50 musicians' names who are more talented than me. I can rattle out without any problems I can name. But at the same time, I can tell you with full conviction that nobody is as hardworking as I am. And nobody knows how to apply their music in the way that I apply my music. So basically, I've got a unique ability that the other musicians do not have. But when it comes to pure talent, there are, in the whole of India, if you look at it, there are hundreds of musicians who are far more talented than me. But the thing is that you have to have that unique ability. You have to have all 3 abilities. You have to be extremely skilled at what you do. You have to be an entrepreneur, and you have to be a leader. About collaboration, obviously reach out to me and we'll work out something. Yeah.
That's very gracious of you.
Hariom sir, I actually wanted to give you a standing ovation, but I can't now. So let's get straight to the question. Sir, nowadays you spoke about how the environment and how we need to give our eventual attention to it. But also in an urban city, like I'm also from Bengaluru as you are, there are dogs, there are cats, there are animals, cows, especially the ones the sacredest animals which we have to pray, that are mistreated, cruelly treated, and especially reels are also made out of it where they cruelly torture them and made money out of it actually. So don't you think that I actually want, it's a request from me that if you could focus more on these animals, because these are also a part of our environment, and not only killing them but mutating, the mutations that go into them are also very dangerous, especially in rats and cats and all other such sort of urban animals. So I sincerely hope that you could make a attempt on it to research for better view on this aspect. Thank you, sir.
No, of course, what you're saying is true. When it comes to the urban wildlife and urban population, I mean, of animals, I myself have got 2 rescue dogs at home. So, so they are my pets. In fact, both of them have got beautiful stories. Like, for example, one of my dog's name is Rocky. In fact, I remember his birthday because I adopted Rocky, that is my dog, I think about 5 days before the Jabangadash concert, which I did for Chinmaya Mission. So that's how I remember his birthday. It was, not birthday, sorry, the day when I got him into my home. So his story was that my front door neighbor, the family that was renting the house, my front door neighbor. Rocky, that is the dog, he basically showed up on our street when he was like maybe about 2 or 3 weeks old. Now, how it works with stray dogs, I do not know if you're aware of it, but like, when they give birth and they have puppies, the mother takes care of the puppy for a maximum of about 3 weeks. And then after, the mother starts pushing the puppy into other localities because they're very territorial animals, because the mother starts looking at the puppies as being, as being competition for food. So this puppy ended up on, on our street, and I love the dogs on my street. And so our front door neighbor found him very cute and would take him inside the house, and he would pretty much stay inside the house, feed him like 2-3 times a day and all of that stuff. And then maybe about 3 or 4 months later, he was no longer cute, right? Because he grew up. So they stopped allowing him inside the house. And there was this one night where he tried to force himself, because he does not know how to fend for himself. He does not know how to survive on the street. And so he does not know how to get food for himself. So he's lost those crucial weeks of learning how to survive on the street and learning how to be street smart. So he tried to force himself into the gate of my front door house. And while doing that, he broke all 4 of his legs. And he was screaming and howling that whole night. So I went downstairs. I picked him up, brought him inside the house. And I thought that, all right, let me keep him for a week till he heals. And then, and then it's been 6 years now. So, so that's the story of him. But the thing is that what you're saying is absolutely true. So I feel that, I've got very, because like with all the animals that you mentioned, whether it's cats, whether it's dogs, whether it's cows, it's a different way that we have to deal with all 3 of them. Because the street dogs, in my opinion, the only way to deal with them is to ensure that all of them are spayed and neutered. So that, the population decreases, and you take care of whoever is existing, that is for sure. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to pedigree dogs that we have, like, the Alsatians and the Golden Retrievers, they're not a natural breed. You don't see a Golden Retriever in the forest. You don't see an Alsatian, like, in Kabini or something like that, where everybody's trying to take photographs of it and stuff like that. So you don't see all of that. They're all human-made breeds, They were made for human entertainment, human purposes and all of that stuff. And all of them, they've got very heartbreaking stories. Like, for example, a Great Dane only lives for about 6 or 7 years because it was bred for that specific purpose of living only for 6-7 years, and it develops a heart condition. Golden Retrievers develop a liver condition when they're about 12 or 13 years, and they develop heart failure because they've been bred for that specific purpose, that they should not live for that long because they're companions for humans. So all these animals are not natural breeds. So the only way for us to do it is to adopt whatever dogs are there, and to ensure that that they do not overbreed, and and our world is not filled with them, because it's just a very heartbreaking what do you call that? I mean, I can go on and on about it, but like, it's better that everybody reads about it and figures this out.
Thank you so much. So the COP20 is under the UN, and I believe it is common knowledge that sometimes the developed countries make promises but don't fulfill them. and because of that, the developing countries are exploited. For like example, for the audience, like in Glasgow's COP26, $100 billion deal was made, but it was unmet by the developed countries. So what do you think about this when it comes to questioning the UN's credibility, and what can developing countries do?
See, in my opinion, it's not about the UN's credibility, it's about the developed nations' credibility. Because at the end of the day, what is the United Nations? United Nations is basically 193 member states coming together. And it's not like the United Nations can police the, the developed nations and send an army to USA and tell them that if you don't follow these protocols that you yourself have set, we are going to wage war against you. At the end of the day, the UN is powerless if people do not live up to their commitments. So I guess this is definitely a problem where developed nations are doing a lot of lip service, that is for sure. And they constantly blame developing nations because developing nations have to reach a stage of development. Now, I'll just quickly give you perspective on this about developing nations versus developed nations. You can sit down. So, in my immense travels in India, especially in the rural areas of India, and and sensitizing myself to problems on the grassroots level, which I believe everyone should do, because you can read about problems that are on the grassroots levels. You can read about because we in urban India usually live in a bubble, but we need to travel and we need to sensitize ourselves to issues. So when I try to sensitize myself to the issues, I realized that in India, there are only two kinds of problems, if you put it into two large buckets. One is the problem of survival, and the second is the problem of thriving. Now, survival problems are problems. So first, I'll talk about thriving problems. So unfortunately, the environment is looked upon more as a problem of thriving. Now, to get to solving a problem of thriving, you have to go through a whole lot of survival problems like poverty, hunger, malnutrition, education, sanitation, gender inequality, gender violence, innovation, education. These are the kind of things, problems that you have to actually solve in order for people to buy into problems like climate action and stuff like that. Because climate action people do not care about unless you solve these grassroots problems. And as an environmentalist, one has to be very realistic about this. One cannot think that, okay, stop coal, stop this, stop that, stop this. You cannot have a black and white solution for this. One has to look at growing everybody together. And of course, the Western narratives that are being sold in India. Like, for example, in the West, they say to solve climate change, or like the Greta Thunberg approach, to solve climate change, you have to consume less of everything. But what if you go to a village which is in adjunct poverty and you tell them consume less of everything? They're going to be like, we don't have anything to consume in the first place. What are you talking about? Or you tell them that let's make a better future for our future generations. They're going to be, what about our generation? We don't even have electricity, or we don't have proper sanitation. We don't have proper toilets or whatever. So that is what we need to do. We need to be realistic. We need to ensure that everybody at the grassroots levels are happy. Everybody's got their dreams. Everybody's got their aspirations. All of these dreams and aspirations need to be fulfilled. And that is the reason why it is important for us to travel to understand these dreams and aspirations and understand that we have to be realistic in our approach towards solving the climate crisis. And that's the only way we will be able to get the whole of the country to buy in to this whole environmental nature. And of course, before ending, I would like to also say that when it comes to communication, we were discussing it a little earlier, there are always two approaches towards communicating a problem, especially when it comes to climate. One is what I would call, since I mentioned her name, the Greta Thunberg approach, which is all about doom and gloom and about disasters and about shaming people into action, which is quite effective in some ways, but maybe not in the long term, but it is quite effective in some ways, to actually shame people into action. But what I've tried to follow in my life is what I would call the David Attenborough approach, which is about ensuring that everybody fall in love with nature. And hopefully through that love, we will find it within ourselves to protect, to conserve and sustain. In fact, a Senegalese philosopher, Baba Diom, once said that at the end of the day, we as human beings will only protect things that we love. Okay, because that's how we are as people. We'll only protect things that we love. We will only love things that we understand. And we will only understand things that we are taught. So we have to really internalize this, that we only protect things that we love, we only love things that we understand, we will only understand things that we are taught. Now the national anthem video that you saw, all of these animals that you saw in that video, if you only think about it, all of these animals are a maximum of a 12 to 15 hour drive away from where we are right now. So if you think about it, all those animals that you saw, If you drive for 12 to 15 hours, a maximum of 15 hours if you drive, you'll be able to see every single one of those animals in real life. That is how beautiful our country is. That is how beautiful nature is in our country. And that's how we are one of the very, very few countries in the world which still have large mammals walking around in our country. You know, we are the only country in the world which has got tigers and lions in our country. You know, no other country has got that. We've got pristine forests in our country. We've got pristine biodiversity, pristine wildlife in our country. And I spoke about human and elephant conflict. The only reason why we have human and elephant conflict in our country is because we have elephants. And we have forests. Imagine a country like America where it is complete deforestation. At a complete and a total level. Where they do not have large mammals walking around. So basically, same thing in Europe. Where development, the so-called development that they have, which is against environment, basically has reached a stage where they do not have any of this pristine forests that we have. So basically, us having human and elephant conflict is not saying that we are doing bad in our country. It's saying that actually if we look at it from a different perspective, it shows that we still have forests, we still have humans which are living in coexistence, and that's the reason why we have this conflict too. So I guess what we need to do is that fall in love with the natural world of our country, acknowledge that all of this beauty exists in our country, and figure out protecting it, because with 1.3 billion people in our country, and the largest population in the world in our country, if we just are environmentally conscious within our own country, if we protect our own wildlife, protect our own nature, protect our own rivers, then we are not protecting India, we are pretty much protecting the world.
Thank you. There are people who make simple things complex, out of reach. They make you feel judged, guilty, and that kind of you lose the spark to act. And then there are people who make complex things simple, doable, attainable within your reach. And I think your commitment towards music to recognize your authentic passion, as well as your dedication to environment, is infectious. And you are one of those persons who help us, inspire us to actually act, who make us believe that this is doable and this is within our reach. Once again, thank you. It's been an absolute privilege for me to be sharing a stage with a 3-time Grammy Award winner. So thank you once again.
Between the two of us, we have 3 Grammys.
I would most humbly accept that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Swarupanandaji.
I request Swami Swarupanandaji, the Global Head of Chinmaya Mission, to felicitate our dignitaries.
You have not only heard, but seen what a naturalist he is. Isn't it? But ever since I met him for the first time, one thing that you all must have noticed, but I certainly did, that besides all his achievements, besides all his virtues, besides all his humility, I find him very endearing. And we, in our Chinmaya family, and he's very much part of our Chinmaya family, we'd like to give to him our Chinmaya gifts, Chinmaya Upahar.
Bharat